The story of Esther in the Bible. Have you ever wondered if your life has a bigger purpose than you imagine? The story of Esther shows us that even an ordinary person, in the right moment, can change the course of history. This is not just a tale of ancient Persia. It's a reminder that God works behind the scenes, even when he seems silent. The book of Esther takes us into the royal courts of Persia, where an orphaned girl becomes queen and risks everything to save her people. Let's walk through this powerful story step by step. The story begins with King Xerxes, ruler of a vast empire stretching across 127 provinces. He was known for his wealth, power, and love of grand feasts. After days of drinking and boasting at one of his lavish banquets, he demanded that Queen Vashti appear before his guests to show off her beauty. But Vashti refused. Her bold no humiliated the king in front of his nobles. In anger, and at the urging of his advisors, Xerxes removed Vashti from her royal position. A decree was made. Every man should be the ruler in his own household. Vashti was gone, and the throne beside Xerxes stood empty. After his anger cooled, the king missed Vashti. His officials suggested a search for a new queen. Beautiful young women from across the empire were brought to the palace. Among them was a young Jewish woman named Hadassah, better known by her Persian name, Esther. She was an orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai. Before she entered the palace, Mordecai instructed her not to reveal that she was Jewish. Esther was taken into the royal courts. Unlike others who relied on outward beauty, she was humble, kind, and wise. Everyone who met her was impressed, especially the officials in charge of the women. When her time came to meet the king, Esther stood out above all the others. The king was captivated by her grace and beauty. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. But still, no one knew her true identity. Not long after Esther became queen, her cousin Mordecai uncovered a plot to assassinate the king. He passed the information to Esther, who reported it to Xerxes. The plot was stopped, and Mordecai's loyalty was written down in the royal records, though he received no reward at that time. Meanwhile, a man named Haman rose to power in the king's court. The king elevated him to a high position, and everyone was commanded to bow before him. But Mordecai, being a Jew, refused. Haman's pride turned into fury. When he discovered Mordecai's heritage, he decided not only to destroy Mordecai, but to wipe out all Jews in the empire. He convinced King Xerxes that the Jews were a threat to unity. With the king's seal, Haman issued a decree. On a set date, all Jews were to be destroyed. When the decree spread, the Jews mourned in sackcloth and ashes. Mordecai sent word to Esther, urging her to plead with the king, but Esther was afraid. Approaching the king without being invited was punishable by death unless he extended his golden scepter. Esther had not been summoned for 30 days. Mordecai's response is one of the most famous lines in the Bible. "Do not think you will escape in the palace. If you remain silent, deliverance will come from elsewhere. But you and your family will perish. And who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." These words struck Esther deeply. She asked Mordecai to gather the Jews of Susa to fast and pray for 3 days. She and her maids would do the same. Then she said with resolve, "I will go to the king, even if it costs me my life. If I perish, I perish." On the 3rd day, Esther bravely entered the king's presence. Xerxes extended the golden scepter, sparing her life. She invited him and Haman to a banquet. At the meal, instead of revealing her request, she invited them to a second banquet the next day. That night, the king could not sleep. He ordered the royal records to be read to him. By chance, the story of Mordecai's loyalty was brought up the time he saved the king from assassination. Realizing Mordecai had never been honored, the king decided to reward him. At that very moment, Haman entered, intending to ask permission to hang Mordecai on a gallows he had built. Before he could speak, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Thinking the king meant him, Haman described a grand display, royal robes, the king's horse, and public recognition. To his horror, the king ordered him to do exactly that for Mordecai. Haman was forced to parade his enemy through the streets in honor. Humiliated and furious, he returned home in despair. At the second banquet, the king again asked Esther for her request. This time she spoke boldly. "Spare my life and the lives of my people, for we have been sold to destruction. Our enemy is this wicked Haman. The king was enraged. He stormed out into the garden. Haman, terrified, fell before Esther to beg for mercy. When the king returned and saw Haman near Esther, he accused him of assaulting the queen. At once, Haman was seized and hanged on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. Though Haman was gone, his decree remained. In Persian law, no royal edict could be revoked. But the king gave Esther and Mordecai authority to issue a new decree. The Jews were allowed to gather, defend themselves, and destroy anyone who attacked them. On the appointed day, their enemies fell, and the Jews were delivered. In the capital city of Susa and throughout the provinces, victory was theirs. The very day set for their destruction became a day of triumph. To remember this deliverance, the feast of Purim was established, a celebration of joy, feasting, and generosity toward the poor. What was once a day of fear became a day of life. The book of Esther reminds us that even when God seems silent, he is always at work. He raises ordinary people to extraordinary places for his purposes. Esther, an orphan and an exile, became a queen who saved her people. But here's something many people miss according to the Jewish calendar. It was in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, that Esther was taken into the king's palace and chosen for her divine assignment. So, if you are watching this video in the month of October, the 10th month in our calendar, I want to speak a blessing over your life. Just as Esther found favor before kings, may you find favor in unexpected places. Just as Esther's voice brought deliverance, may your words bring life, hope, and breakthrough. If this story inspires you, write this in the comments. Lord, give me courage for such a time as this. And remember, when God seems silent, he is never absent. Share this video and subscribe for more. God bless you.